The Monster War. Chapter 1. First Contact. The exploration vessel New Beginnings drifted through the void like a metal cathedral, its hull gleaming silver against the star-scattered darkness of the outer rim. Captain Elena Williams stood on the bridge, watching the main view screen display the asteroid field ahead, a cosmic graveyard of tumbling rock and ice that had drawn them here from Earth's distant colonies. "Anything interesting, Marcus?" she asked, turning to her chief science officer. Dr. Marcus Davis hunched over his console, fingers dancing across holographic displays as streams of data cascaded down his screens. The energy readings were unlike anything in the Federation's extensive databases, organic signatures mixed with mineral compositions, as if the asteroids themselves were somehow alive. "Captain, I'm detecting massive biosignatures throughout the field," Davis reported, his voice tight with excitement and unease. "Whatever's out there, it's big, and it's moving." Williams felt her stomach clench. In 30 years of deep space exploration, she'd learned to trust her instincts. Something was wrong here. "Are we talking about life forms?" "Not just life forms," Davis whispered, his face pale in the console's blue glow. "These readings suggest creatures the size of shuttlecraft, maybe larger. And they're not like anything we've cataloged." Before Williams could respond, the ship's proximity alarms shrieked to life. The view screen exploded with movement as shapes emerged from the asteroid field creatures that defied every principle of xenobiology. Some bore chitinous exoskeletons like enormous arthropods, their multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws, while membranous wings carried them through the vacuum with impossible grace. Others writhed through space like serpentine leviathans, their scales glowing with bioelectric energy, tentacles trailing behind them like living cables. "My God," Davis breathed, "they're beautiful." Williams watched in horrified fascination as more creatures poured from the asteroid field. Some resembled deep-sea creatures adapted for space, their translucent bodies pulsing with internal organs that cast eerie light into the darkness. Others combined avian features with insectoid limbs, their beaks opening to reveal rows of crystalline teeth that could probably shear through ship armor. "Captain," her tactical officer called out, "they're moving toward us. Fast!" The creatures approached with fluid coordination, their movements suggesting not random behavior, but tactical awareness. They spread into formation patterns, flanking the New Beginnings from multiple vectors. Williams had seen enough pack predators to recognize hunting behavior when she saw it. "Shields up! All hands to battle stations!" The first creature struck the forward shields with bone-jarring force. Williams grabbed her command chair as the ship bucked under the impact. More creatures followed, their claws raking across the energy barriers in showers of sparks. The shields held, but Williams could see the power readings dropping with each successive attack. "Their claws are generating some kind of disruption field," Davis reported, his scientific curiosity warring with terror. "The shields are being overwhelmed." A serpentine creature coiled around the ship's hull, its bioelectric organs sending cascades of energy across the New Beginnings superstructure. Lights flickered on the bridge as the creature's discharge interfaced with their systems in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "They're learning from our technology," Davis shouted over the alarms. "Captain, these creatures are adapting to our defenses in real time." The shields failed with a sound like breaking glass. Immediately, smaller creatures swarmed the hull, their acid secretions eating through the outer armor plating. Williams felt the ship's artificial gravity fluctuate as the creatures found and began dismantling critical systems. "Emergency transmission to Federation Command," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Full priority. Tell them we've encountered hostile alien life forms in Sector 7 Alpha. Unknown number, unknown capabilities, but extremely dangerous. They demonstrate tactical awareness and rapid adaptation to human technology." Her communications officer worked frantically at his console as the ship shuddered under renewed assault. "Captain, the transmission array is taking damage. I'm not sure how much I can get through." Williams looked at the view screen where more creatures continued to emerge from the asteroid field. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one different, as if evolution itself had gone mad in this corner of space, creating an endless variety of predators perfectly adapted for warfare. "Get what you can," she said quietly. "Earth needs to know what's coming." The ship's hull groaned under the assault. Through the deck plating, Williams could hear the sound of claws and acid working their way toward the bridge. The creatures weren't just attacking, they were systematically dismantling the new beginnings, studying each component as they destroyed it. The main view screen flickered and died. Emergency lighting cast everything in blood-red shadows as the last of their defenses failed. Williams watched her crew continue working at their stations, professional to the end, even as the sounds of the creatures grew closer. "Transmission away, Captain," her communications officer reported. "I got most of it through before they severed the array." Williams nodded, knowing it might be the last thing she ever did as captain of the New Beginnings. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, her warning was racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds. Humanity would know what was coming, but would they be ready? The bulkhead door buckled inward with a screech of tortured metal. Through the gaps, Williams caught glimpses of chitinous armor and glowing eyes that held an alien instinct far removed from anything human. The creatures had found them. As the bridge filled with shadows and the sound of approaching death, Captain Elena Williams had one final thought. Humanity had just met something that might be their equal in the dark vastness of space. And they were hungry. Chapter 2. The War Begins. The emergency klaxons at Federation Command Headquarters on Luna had been silent for over a century. When they screamed to life at 0347 hours, Admiral Sarah Blake knew that humanity's age of peaceful expansion had come to an end. She stood in the war room's holographic display chamber, watching the fragmented transmission from the New Beginnings replay for the fourth time. Captain Williams's face flickered in and out of focus, her words distorted by interference, but the message was clear enough. Hostile alien life forms, unknown number, extremely dangerous, tactical awareness. "How many ships have we lost contact with in Sector 7 Alpha?" Blake asked her intelligence officer. Commander Torres consulted his data pad, his face grim. "The New Beginnings, the cargo hauler Prosperity, and the research vessel Darwin's Dream, all within the past 72 hours. No response to any hails." Blake felt a chill run down her spine. 3 ships didn't simply vanish without a trace. "Scramble the 5th Reconnaissance Fleet. I want every sensor array we have pointed at that sector." "Admiral," Torres hesitated, "the 5th Fleet is our fastest response unit. But if these creatures destroyed 3 ships already, then we need to know what we're dealing with before we lose more." Blake's voice brooked no argument. "Launch immediately." 48 hours later, the 5th Fleet's flagship Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sector 7 Alpha. Fleet Admiral Chen Morrison had commanded the ship through pirate raids and stellar phenomena, but nothing had prepared him for what his sensors detected. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice shaking slightly, "I'm reading debris fields from all 3 missing vessels. And, Admiral, you need to see this." The main view screen lit up with a tactical display showing the asteroid field where the New Beginnings had made first contact. But the asteroids were moving, not drifting on gravitational currents, but moving with purpose. As Morrison watched, the rocks began to separate, revealing the creatures within. "Dear God," Morrison whispered. "They were using the asteroids as camouflage." The creatures that emerged defied every principle of xenobiology Morrison knew. Some were the size of fighter craft. Others rivaled his escort destroyers. They moved in coordinated swarms, their diverse forms suggesting countless evolutionary adaptations for warfare. Arthropod-like creatures with razor claws flanked serpentine beasts whose bioelectric organs crackled with energy. Above them, winged horrors that resembled a fusion of prehistoric pterosaurs and deep-sea anglerfish cast shadows across the void. "Battle stations, all fighters launch," Morrison ordered. "Weapons free!" The human fleet opened fire with plasma cannons that could vaporize asteroids. The brilliant energy beams lanced out toward the approaching swarm, and Morrison allowed himself a moment of hope as several creatures were caught in the initial barrage. That hope died quickly. The creatures that were hit didn't vaporize. They absorbed the energy, their bioluminescent organs flaring brighter as they converted the plasma into something their bodies could use. Others in the swarm immediately began adapting, their external armor shifting and changing to deflect subsequent shots. "Sir, our weapons are barely scratching them," the weapons officer called out. "They're adapting faster than we can adjust our targeting." Morrison watched in growing horror as the creatures demonstrated their tactical awareness. They didn't charge mindlessly into the human formation. Instead, they moved with the coordination of a pack of wolves, using the larger creatures as living shields, while smaller, faster ones darted in to strike at weak points in the ship's hulls. A group of crystalline creatures that resembled living starfish attached themselves to the Valiant's starboard hull. Morrison felt the ship shudder as they began secreting acid that ate through the armor plating with terrifying efficiency. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 9, Damage Control reported. "They're targeting our weapon systems." The creatures weren't just attacking, they were learning. Morrison realized with mounting dread that each assault was more precise than the last. The monsters were adapting to counteract human technology in real time, identifying weaknesses and exploiting them with devastating effectiveness. "Sir, we're losing the Ranger." Morrison turned to see one of his destroyer escorts being overwhelmed by a swarm of crab-like creatures. Each one was the size of a shuttle, their multiple limbs ending in claws that could shear through hull plating like paper. They moved across the ship's surface with disturbing coordination, dismantling weapon systems and engines with surgical precision. "All ships, fall back to minimum safe distance," Morrison ordered. "Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace." But as the fleet tried to withdraw, the creatures revealed another horrifying capability. Several of the larger, more exotic creatures began generating spatial distortions, their bio-organs creating gravity wells that prevented the human ships from engaging their faster-than-light drives. "Jump drives are offline," the navigator reported in panic. "Something is interfering with our hyperspace generators." Morrison realized they were trapped. The creatures had not only adapted to human weapons, they had developed countermeasures for human escape tactics. This wasn't just an encounter with hostile wildlife. This was warfare at a level of sophistication that suggested these creatures had been in conflict with other spacefaring civilizations. "Get a message drone away," Morrison ordered grimly. "Tell command we've engaged a hostile force of unknown origin. Conventional weapons are ineffective." Repeat, conventional weapons are ineffective. They demonstrate advanced tactical awareness and can adapt to our technology in real time. As his communications officer launched the small, unmanned probe that would carry Morrison's warning to Federation space, the Admiral watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by creatures that fought with the precision of a military force and the savagery of apex predators. The last thing Morrison saw before the Valiant's bridge was breached was a massive creature that resembled a fusion of manta ray and jellyfish, its translucent body pulsing with organs that generated enough electromagnetic interference to shut down every system on the ship. In its wake came smaller creatures that moved with purpose, studying the human technology they were destroying. When the message drone reached Federation Command 3 days later, Admiral Blake stood once again in the war room, watching Morrison's final transmission. His words echoed in the chamber. "Conventional weapons are ineffective, advanced tactical awareness, real-time adaptation. "How many ships?" Blake asked quietly. "The entire Fifth Fleet," Torres replied. 18 vessels, no survivors." Blake stared at the tactical display showing the growing no-man's land where humanity's ships simply vanished. The creatures weren't just defending territory, they were expanding, claiming new regions of space with each victory. "Issue a general mobilization order," Blake commanded. "Alert all colonial governments. As of this moment, the Interplanetary Federation is at war." She paused, looking at the star charts that showed humanity's colonies scattered across dozens of systems. For the first time since leaving Earth, humanity faced an enemy that might be their equal. "And pray to whatever gods are listening," Blake added quietly, "that we can find a way to fight them before they reach our core worlds." Outside the command center's viewports, Luna's ancient surface reflected Earth's light. Soon, both worlds would need to prepare for a war unlike any in human history. A war against creatures that evolved for the sole purpose of conquest, and who learned from every battle they fought. Chapter 3. The Meteorite Discovery. 6 months after the destruction of the Fifth Fleet, Dr. Lisa Park stood in the ruins of what had once been New Geneva Colony on Kepler 442b. The settlement's gleaming biodomes lay shattered like broken eggshells, their contents scattered across the planet's rust-colored surface by creatures that had vanished as quickly as they had appeared. "Another hit and run," muttered Sergeant Rodriguez, her security escort, as they picked their way through the debris field that had once housed 30,000 colonists. "They strip everything clean and then disappear before our reinforcements arrive." Park nodded absently, her attention focused on her scanner readings. As the Federation's leading xenobiologist, she had volunteered for these grim salvage missions, hoping to find some clue that might help humanity understand their enemy. So far, the creatures had left behind nothing but destruction and the occasional shed scale or claw fragment. But today was different. "Sergeant, look at this!" Park called out, kneeling beside what appeared to be a large boulder half buried in the colony's central plaza. Her scanner was going wild with organic readings. "This isn't native rock." Rodriguez approached cautiously, plasma rifle at the ready. "Doc, if that's one of those things playing dead—" "No, it's definitely not alive," Park said, running her gloved hands over the object's surface. "But it's not exactly dead either. This is some kind of organic matrix, almost like—" She paused, studying the readings more carefully. "Like a giant egg casing." The meteorite, as they would later designate it, was roughly spherical and 12 meters in diameter. Its surface was a mottled combination of organic compounds and mineral deposits, creating a shell that looked more grown than formed. Deep grooves and channels covered its exterior, forming patterns that reminded Park of neural networks. "We need to get this to the lab on Mars," Park decided, "immediately." 3 weeks later, in the high-security xenobiology facility buried deep beneath Mars's Olympus Mons, Park stood before the meteorite in a sterile containment chamber. Her team had spent days carefully mapping its structure with non-invasive scanners, revealing a honeycomb interior filled with dozens of chambers. "It's a nursery," Park announced to the assembled researchers and military officials. "The creatures use these meteorites as breeding grounds. Each chamber contained an egg, though most have already hatched." Admiral Blake, who had arrived from Luna that morning, studied the holographic cross-section display. "How many eggs are we talking about?" "The chambers suggest it originally held approximately 60 specimens," Dr. Chen, Park's assistant, replied. "But we've found evidence that most hatched naturally, while others—" He gestured to chambers showing signs of violent breach from within. "Others were consumed." "Consumed?" Blake asked sharply. Park activated another hologram showing the partially digested remains they'd found in several chambers. "The creatures are cannibalistic when food is scarce. The stronger offspring devour the weaker ones, as well as any unhatched eggs. It's a brutal but efficient survival mechanism. Any live specimens? 3 eggs remain intact, Park said, her voice carefully neutral. 2 appear to be in normal developmental stages based on what we've learned about their biology. But the third, she paused, highlighting one chamber on the display. The third is different. The egg in question was larger than the others, its shell displaying bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in complex rhythms. Unlike the mottled, organic appearance of the other eggs, this one had an almost crystalline quality, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Different how? Blake demanded. Park took a breath. The genetic analysis is unprecedented. This egg contains sequences we've never seen before, adaptive markers that suggest the creature inside isn't just another variant of their species, it's something capable of directed evolution. Explain that in terms I can understand, Doctor. Most creatures evolve through environmental pressure over generations. But the genetic markers in this egg suggest this individual could evolve within its own lifetime through metamorphosis. It could adapt and change based on what it encounters, what it consumes, what challenges it faces. The silence in the lab was profound. Dr. Martinez, the facility's director, spoke first. How is that possible? We don't know, Park admitted. The complexity of the genetic structure is beyond anything we've encountered. It's as if this creature was designed to be the perfect adaptive organism. Blake studied the pulsing egg. How rare are these things? Based on the genetic diversity we've sampled from dozens of these nursery meteorites, I'd estimate less than 1 in millions of creatures possess this capability. This is literally the first time we've seen one. Could we learn from it? Use it to understand how to fight them? Park exchanged glances with her team. That's the question, isn't it? This creature represents an unprecedented opportunity to study their biology. But it also represents an enormous risk. Blake moved closer to the containment chamber. What kind of risk? If this creature can evolve based on what it encounters, what happens when it encounters human technology, human biology? What happens if it learns from us while we're trying to learn from it? The egg's bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster, as if responding to their presence. Park watched the readings on her scanner spike and fall in complex rhythms. The metabolic activity is increasing, she reported. I think it's close to hatching. Blake stared at the egg for a long moment, weighing the potential intelligence it might provide against the danger it represented. Outside the facility, the war raged on. Every day brought reports of new defeats, new colonies lost, new fleets destroyed by creatures that seemed to learn from every encounter. How long do we have? Blake asked. Based on the development patterns of the other eggs, perhaps 72 hours. Blake nodded slowly. Do it. Let it hatch. But I want every precaution in place. Maximum containment protocols. And if this thing shows any sign of becoming a threat, we'll terminate it immediately, Park promised, though she felt a chill at the words. This could be humanity's greatest opportunity to understand their enemy. Or it could be the moment they handed their enemies the key to destroying them. As if responding to their conversation, the egg's patterns shifted again. The bioluminescent displays creating new configurations that looked almost like writing, or perhaps warnings. Park made final adjustments to the containment systems and monitoring equipment. In 3 days, humanity would either gain invaluable insight into their enemy's biology, or they would create something that could doom them all. The egg pulsed once more, its light painting alien shadows on the sterile walls of the laboratory. Somewhere in its crystalline depths, something ancient and terrible was preparing to be born. Chapter 4. The Failed Experiment. The creature that emerged from the crystalline egg defied every expectation Dr. Lisa Park had formed during her months of studying monster biology. Where other specimens had been mindlessly aggressive, this one displayed an unsettling intelligence. Where others had been locked into their physical forms, this one began changing within hours of hatching. Day 3, post-emergence, Park recorded, speaking into her audio log while watching the creature through the reinforced viewing chamber. Subject continues to demonstrate unprecedented adaptive behavior. Unlike its siblings, it shows no aggressive tendencies toward human personnel, but rather appears to be studying us. The creature, roughly the size of a large dog, but with a fluid, constantly shifting form, had initially resembled a cross between a cephalopod and an arthropod. Now, barely 72 hours later, it sported what appeared to be primitive sensory organs that tracked the movements of everyone who entered the observation area. More disturbing still, it had begun manipulating objects in its containment cell with a dexterity that suggested tool use. "Dr. Park," her assistant Dr. Chen called from his monitoring station, "you need to see this." Park moved to Chen's workstation, where bioscanners displayed the creature's internal structure in real time. What she saw made her stomach clench with fear. "It's growing new organs," she whispered. "Look here, these structures weren't present yesterday. They appear to be bioelectric generators similar to what we've observed in the larger combat specimens. And here," Chen pointed to another section of the display, "these look like acid production glands. It's developing the same capabilities as the creatures that breached our ship hulls." Park studied the readings with growing alarm. The creature wasn't just growing randomly, it was developing specific adaptations based on what it had observed in the laboratory. When technicians had used electronic devices near its chamber, it grew bioelectric organs. When maintenance crews had cleaned the adjacent chambers with chemical solvents, it developed chemical processing systems. It's learning from everything it sees, Park realized. Every piece of technology, every tool, every process, it's incorporating countermeasures into its own biology. On the 5th day, the creature demonstrated capabilities that sent shockwaves through the research facility. During routine maintenance of its containment cell, it generated a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse that disabled the electronic locks on its chamber door. Only the mechanical backup systems prevented a containment breach. "How did it know the exact frequency to disrupt our electronics?" demanded Dr. Martinez, the facility director, during an emergency meeting. Park consulted her notes, her hands shaking slightly. "It's been watching our maintenance procedures for days. Every time a technician used a diagnostic tool, it was analyzing the electromagnetic signatures. It didn't just copy our technology, it learned to defeat it." Admiral Blake's voice crackled through the secure communication link from Luna Command. "Dr. Park, what is your assessment of the containment situation?" "Unstable and deteriorating rapidly," Park replied honestly. "The creature's evolution is accelerating beyond our ability to predict. Each day it develops new capabilities that render our previous security measures obsolete." "Has it shown any aggressive behavior toward your staff?" "No, Admiral. That's what's so unsettling. It hasn't attempted to harm anyone. It seems curious about us, but its curiosity is leading it to develop abilities that could be catastrophic if it chose to use them." By the 7th day, the situation had become untenable. The creature had developed organs that could synthesize complex chemicals, biomechanical structures that interfaced with electronic systems, and sensory arrays that could detect structural weaknesses in its containment chamber. Most alarming of all, it had begun emitting complex bioelectric signals in patterns that resembled data transmission. "It's trying to communicate," Dr. Chen reported during the morning briefing. "These signals are too complex to be random. They contain structured information." "Communicate with whom?" Park asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Unknown. But if it's trying to contact other specimens of its species," the implications hung heavy in the air. If the creature could communicate with the monsters attacking human colonies, it could potentially share everything it had learned about human technology and biology. "That's it!" Admiral Blake's voice cut through the tense silence. "Terminate the experiment immediately." Park felt a pang of loss that surprised her. "Admiral, this creature represents the greatest scientific discovery in human history. If we could just— Doctor, that thing has learned to circumvent our security, analyze our technology, and potentially communicate with our enemies. Every minute it remains alive, it becomes more dangerous. End it now." Park looked through the viewing chamber one last time at the creature that had become the focus of her life for the past week. It seemed to sense her presence, its newly evolved sensory organs tracking her movement. For a moment, its alien gaze meeting her human one, and she could have sworn she saw something like understanding pass between them. "Initiating termination sequence," Park announced, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. The containment chamber flooded with high-energy plasma designed to instantly vaporize any organic matter. For a moment, brilliant light obscured the viewing chamber, and when it faded, Park expected to see nothing but ash and empty space. Instead, she saw the creature in its death throes, its body dissolving under the plasma bombardment. But even as it died, its bioelectric organs flared with unprecedented activity. Complex electromagnetic patterns erupted from the chamber signals far more sophisticated than anything they had previously recorded. "It's transmitting something," Chen shouted over the alarms. "Massive data burst, heading into deep space." Park watched in horror and fascination as the creature's final act encoded and broadcast everything it had learned about human technology, human biology, and human weaknesses. The signal was compressed, sophisticated, and powerful enough to reach across light-years of space. When the plasma finally consumed the last of the creature's form, an eerie silence fell over the laboratory. The most dangerous organism humanity had ever encountered was dead, but its final transmission was already racing toward unknown recipients in the depths of space. "What did it send?" Admiral Blake demanded. Park stared at the empty containment chamber, her mind racing through the implications. "Everything," she whispered. "It sent everything it learned about us." The failed experiment was over, but its consequences were just beginning. Somewhere in monster-controlled space, other creatures like it might soon receive detailed intelligence about human technology and tactics, intelligence that could tip further the balance of the war forever. Park made one final entry in her log. Subject terminated after 7 days of observation. Recommendation: if any similar specimens are discovered, they should be destroyed on sight. The risk to human survival is too great to justify further research. She didn't yet know that her recommendation would prove to be both correct and, tragically, too late. The creature's dying transmission had already reached its intended recipient, another being capable of evolution, currently fighting in the front lines of humanity's war for survival. Chapter 5. The Unique Evolution. In the contested Vega sector, where human and monster forces had been locked in brutal stalemate for 8 months, a young creature designated Specimen 7 Alpha by human military observers arrived with the latest wave of reinforcements from the deep territories. Unlike the scarred, battle-hardened veterans that typically led monster assaults, 7 Alpha was small, sleek, and driven by an insatiable hunger that went beyond mere sustenance. The creature possessed the basic template, common to its species, a flexible, chitinous exoskeleton that could adapt to vacuum or atmosphere, multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp appendages, and bioelectric organs capable of disrupting human electronics. But where others of its kind followed predictable patterns of aggression and territorial dominance, 7 Alpha displayed an unsettling curiosity about everything it encountered. During its first engagement, a raid on a Federation supply convoy traveling between fortified outposts 7 Alpha experienced something that would change the course of the war, though neither side realized it at the time. The convoy consisted of 3 heavy transport vessels escorted by a pair of destroyers. What should have been a routine resupply mission became a massacre when a swarm of monsters materialized from hyperspace, bypassing the convoy's early warning systems through methods human tactical analysts still couldn't explain. 7. Alpha found itself aboard the transport Meridian, its claws easily shearing through the ship's hull plating as panicked crew members sealed themselves behind emergency bulkheads. The creature moved through the corridors with the fluid grace of a predator, guided by instincts honed over countless generations of warfare. It was in Engineering Section C that 7 Alpha encountered Chief Petty Officer Marcus Volkov, a cybernetic engineer who had chosen to remain at his post rather than flee to the evacuation pods. As the creature cornered him among the quantum drive components, Volkov raised his plasma cutter in a futile gesture of defiance. "Come on, then," Volkov muttered, his augmented left arm sparking from damaged circuits. "Let's see how you like a taste of human engineering." But instead of simply killing the engineer as its siblings would have done, 7 Alpha consumed him, not just his flesh and blood, but somehow absorbing the complex neural patterns that contained decades of technical knowledge. The process was unlike anything the creature or any other creature in their race, including self-evolving monsters, had experienced before. Instead of mere physical nourishment, it felt new pathways forming in its nervous system, new understanding flooding through its consciousness. For the first time in its existence, 7 Alpha comprehended concepts beyond hunger and territory. It understood the function of the machines surrounding it, grasped the principles of faster-than-light travel, and began to perceive the broader strategic picture of the war it was fighting. But the transformation went deeper than technical knowledge. Through Volkov's memories, 7 Alpha experienced human emotions, love for family, pride in craftsmanship, fear of the unknown. These alien sensations were disturbing, yet fascinating, adding layers of complexity to its previously simple existence. Over the following weeks, 7 Alpha's unique ability manifested more dramatically with each feeding. When it consumed Dr. Sarah Kim, a xenobiology researcher, it gained not only her scientific knowledge, but her methodical approach to problem-solving. The consumption of Marine Sergeant Rodriguez provided tactical training and combat experience that surpassed what 7 Alpha had learned through instinct alone. Unlike its kin, who grew larger and more aggressive with each victory, 7 Alpha began to grow more thoughtful and strategic. It started avoiding unnecessary conflicts, choosing its targets based not on territory or dominance displays, but on what it could learn from them. Each human it consumed added new dimensions to its understanding of technology, strategy, and the complex motivations driving the war. The creature's physical form began to change as well, though more subtly than its mental evolution. Its bioelectric organs developed greater sophistication, allowing it to interface directly with human technology. Its sensory arrays expanded to process electromagnetic signatures it had never noticed before. Most remarkably, its neural pathways began developing structures analogous to human cognitive centers. Areas dedicated to abstract reasoning, long-term planning, and something that might have been imagination. It was during a particularly fierce battle over the mining station at Proxima Centauri b that 7 Alpha received the signal that would accelerate its evolution. In the middle of combat, as human and monster forces tore each other apart in the station's corridors, the creature's enhanced bioelectric organs detected a complex electromagnetic transmission from deep space. The signal was sophisticated, encoded with patterns that spoke directly to the adaptive genetic sequences in 7 Alpha's DNA. As the transmission integrated with its cellular structure, the creature experienced flashes of technological knowledge. The dying creature from Dr. Park's laboratory had shared the sum total of what it acquired, compressed into a format that 7 Alpha's evolving biology could process. But 7 Alpha was different from the laboratory specimen. Where that creature had been isolated and observed, 7 Alpha had direct experience with human behavior, technology, and tactics. The combination of inherited knowledge and practical experience created something unprecedented. A monster that could not only understand human technology, but could improve upon it. The breakthrough came during a desperate assault on the research vessel Dream, which had been conducting deep space surveys near the Vega human defense perimeter. 7 Alpha had tracked the ship for days, studying its crew through passive scans and intercepted communications. Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, the vessel's chief xenobiologist, had spent 40 years studying biology and lately monster behavior. His accumulated knowledge represented humanity's most comprehensive understanding of their enemy. When 7 Alpha finally breached the ship's hull and confronted the elderly scientist in his laboratory, both beings sensed that this moment was different from previous encounters. "You're not like the others, are you?" Dr. Zimmermann said quietly, his hands steady despite the creature looming over him. "I can see it, in the way you move, the way you observe. You're learning." Alpha paused, studying the human through newly sophisticated sensory organs. For the first time, it felt something that might have been curiosity about the individual, rather than simply hunger for what they contained. "Fascinating," Zimmermann continued, apparently unafraid. "If you can understand me, then perhaps there's hope for—" The assault on the research vessel failed catastrophically. Human reinforcements arrived sooner than expected, and the monster swarm was caught between the research vessel's new surprisingly effective defensive arrays and a squadron of Federation destroyers. 7. Alpha watched its companions die around it, cut down by plasma fire and quantum torpedoes, something that was unthinkable just a few months ago. But in those final moments before the human weapons found their mark, 7 Alpha managed to consume Dr. Zimmermann. Unlike its previous feedings, this one felt different, more complete, more transformative. The elderly scientist's vast knowledge merged with 7 Alpha's adaptive biology, just as the creature activated an ability it had developed through consuming a Void Walker months earlier. Space folded around 7 Alpha as it opened a rift in space-time, escaping the doomed battle just as the human vessel exploded in a cascade of antimatter fire. The creature found itself hundreds of light-years away, drifting in the void near an abandoned mining platform deep in monster-controlled territory. But even as it found safety, 7 Alpha felt the overwhelming weight of Dr. Zimmermann's consciousness pressing against its own. 70 years of human experience, scientific knowledge, and emotional complexity began integrating with its alien neural structure. The process was more intense than anything the creature had experienced before, and it knew instinctively that this transformation would either evolve it beyond recognition or destroy it entirely. As 7 Alpha's consciousness began to fragment under the strain of absorbing such vast knowledge, it wrapped itself in a biomechanical cocoon and entered a state of deep metamorphosis. For the first time in its existence, the creature dreamed, and its dreams were filled with human memories of love, loss, discovery, and hope. Somewhere in those dreams, 7 Alpha began to understand that it was becoming something entirely new. No longer simply a monster, but not yet human either. It was evolving into something that might bridge the gap between two species locked in a war neither side fully understood. Chapter 6. Metamorphosis and Awakening. The derelict space station, Osiris-7, had been abandoned for over a century, its corridors dark and silent since the mining corporation that built it had gone bankrupt. Hidden in the asteroid field of the Kepler 438 system, deep in monster-controlled territory, it provided the perfect sanctuary for 7 Alpha's transformation. The creature had instinctively sought out the station's central hub, where the artificial gravity generators still functioned, despite decades of neglect. There, surrounded by the corroded remains of human civilization, 7 Alpha began the most profound metamorphosis in the history of either species. The biomechanical cocoon that enclosed the creature was unlike anything seen in monster biology. It pulsed with bioelectric activity, its surface covered in patterns that resembled both organic neural networks and human circuit designs. For 3 weeks, 7-alpha remained within this chrysalis, its body and mind undergoing radical reconstruction as it processed the vast knowledge contained in Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann's memories. The integration was traumatic beyond description. 7. Alpha's alien consciousness struggled to accommodate 70 years of human experience, emotion, and scientific understanding. The creature's neural pathways were completely rewired, developing new structures that could process abstract concepts, emotional complexity, and individual identity. Through Zimmermann's memories, 7-alpha experienced human childhood for the first time: birthday parties, the wonder of discovering new species, the pain of losing loved ones. It felt the scientist's pride in his research, his fear during the war's early battles, and his deep love for his daughter Emma. These emotions were alien to 7-alpha's original nature, yet they became integral to its evolving consciousness. When the creature finally emerged from its cocoon, it was no longer the same being that had entered. Its form had shifted dramatically, taking on a humanoid configuration while retaining enhanced capabilities that far exceeded human limitations. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, its body maintained the fluid adaptability of monster biology while developing human-like dexterity and proportions. The most striking change was its face, no longer the predatory visage of its kind, but something that could pass for human at a distance. Its skin could shift between a pale human appearance and its natural chitinous texture, while its eyes retained their alien quality, but now held something different: individual consciousness. But the psychological transformation was even more profound than the physical changes. For the first time in its existence, 7-alpha possessed a sense of self that extended beyond immediate survival needs. Through Zimmermann's memories, it fully gained sentience and understood concepts like friendship, scientific curiosity, moral responsibility, and the value of individual life. The creature who could no longer think of itself simply as 7. Alpha began to examine its own existence with the critical eye of a scientist. It understood now that it was unique, possibly the only member of its species to achieve true sentience. The realization was both liberating and isolating. From Zimmermann's memories, the creature learned about human naming conventions and chose a designation for itself: Xeris, derived from the ancient Greek word meaning stranger or foreigner. The name felt appropriate for a being that belonged fully to neither species. Xeris spent its first days after emergence exploring the abandoned station with wonder that would have been impossible in its previous existence. Through Zimmermann's eyes, it could appreciate the elegant engineering of the facility's construction, understand the purpose behind each system and component. It marveled at human ingenuity while simultaneously recognizing how its own species' biological adaptations could improve upon human designs. But it was when Xeris accessed the station's computer archives that the full implications of the war became clear. Through Zimmermann's scientific perspective, Xeris could see the conflict not as a simple territorial dispute, but as a tragic collision between two very different forms of intelligence. Humans fought with technology and strategic thinking, while monsters operated on advanced instinct and biological adaptation. Neither side truly understood the other. Most disturbing was Xeris's new comprehension of the war's trajectory. Through battle reports and casualty statistics it previously acquired from other people it consumed, it could see that humanity was slowly losing. Their technological advantages were being eroded by monster adaptation. Yet, as a result of new human weaponry and knowledge resulting from the war, monster losses were also mounting, and their lack of true intelligence meant they couldn't develop new strategies or abilities on time to undisputably win the war. Xeris began exploring abandoned battlefields throughout the system, using its new understanding to analyze both human technology and monster adaptations. At the site where the Federation destroyer Intrepid had been destroyed 6 months earlier, Xeris examined the wreckage with the eyes of both predator and scientist. The human weapons showed clear signs of the effects of adaptation by monster biology plasma scoring that had been partially absorbed and converted. Hull breaches that demonstrated increasing sophistication in monster attack patterns. But the monster remains told an equally troubling story of creatures pushed to their biological limits, showing signs of malnutrition and desperation. "They're both dying," Xeris said aloud, the first words it had ever spoken. Its voice was a strange blend of harmonic tones that could have passed for human, but carried undertones no human throat could produce. The sound of its own voice startled Xeris, another reminder of how fundamentally it had changed. At another battle site, where the research station Darwin III had fallen to a monster assault, Xeris discovered evidence that made its newly acquired human emotions stir with something like grief. The station's personnel had been conducting peaceful xenobiology research, trying to understand monster behavior through observation rather than warfare. Their death had been senseless, driven by the same instinctual aggression that governed all monster actions. But Xeris could see now what its kin could not. The researchers had been close to breakthroughs that might have led to communication between the species. Dr. Laura Chen's final research notes, recovered from a damaged computer core, showed promising theories about monster bioelectric communication patterns. Her work might have eventually led to the kind of understanding that could have prevented countless deaths on both sides. "Such waste," Xeris murmured, feeling an emotion it recognized from Zimmerman's memories as sorrow. "So much unnecessary waste." As Xeris continued its explorations, a troubling pattern emerged from the data. Although humans were currently weaker than monsters in terms of raw physical capability, their intelligence made them unpredictable. In a prolonged war, human adaptability and resource management could eventually allow them to match monster capabilities, but at a cost that would devastate both species. The realization filled Xeris with a sense of urgency it had never experienced before. Through Zimmerman's scientific training, it could see the war's probable outcomes with mathematical clarity. If the conflict continued along its current trajectory, both species faced extinction, humans through direct defeat, monsters through the gradual obsolescence and resource depletion that would follow a Pyrrhic victory. But Xeris also possessed something neither side had: complete understanding of both species' capabilities, limitations, and motivations. It knew human technology and monster biology, understood tactical thinking and instinctual behavior, could appreciate both individual consciousness and collective survival instincts. For the first time since achieving consciousness, Xeris felt something that might have been hope. If both species were capable of more than their current conflict suggested, then perhaps there was another path forward. But that path would require something unprecedented in monster society: cooperation based on intelligence rather than instinct. Standing in the observation deck of the derelict station, looking out at the stars that marked the boundary between human and monster territory, Xeris made the first conscious choice of its new existence. It would not simply survive as its nature dictated, nor would it pursue the futile glory of territorial conquest that drove its kin. Instead, it would try to become something entirely new, a bridge between two species that had forgotten they might have more to gain from understanding than from warfare. The path would be dangerous, perhaps impossible, but Xeris now possessed something that made the attempt worthwhile: the capacity to imagine a future different from the present. With that realization, the creature once known as 7 Alpha completed its transformation into something the galaxy had never seen before: a monster with a conscience and the will to use it. Chapter 7. The scavenger and student. With newfound consciousness came the recognition that knowledge, not brute force, would be Xerxes' greatest weapon in the war ahead. Unlike its kin, who sought dominance through territorial conquest, Xerxes began a different kind of hunt, one that required patience, intelligence, and an understanding of monster society that its unique evolution had made possible. The nebula of shattered stars, a region where debris from countless battles had created a graveyard spanning several light years, became Xerxes' first classroom. Here, the detritus of war told stories that only someone with understanding of both species could read. Xerxes moved through the wreckage fields with purpose, seeking specific types of monster remains. Its targets weren't chosen for size or strength, but for the specialized abilities their corpses might provide. The constant warfare between human and monster forces, combined with the natural infighting that occurred when territories overlapped, had created abundant opportunities for the right kind of scavenger. The first prize was a Wraith-class monster that had been killed during a territorial dispute with a larger alpha predator. These creatures were among the most feared by human forces, capable of bending light around their bodies to become nearly invisible to both optical sensors and radar arrays. The dead creature's bio-optical organs were still intact, their complex cellular structure preserved by the vacuum of space. Xerxes approached the corpse with scientific precision, using knowledge inherited from Dr. Zimmerman to identify the specific organs responsible for the cloaking ability. The consumption was methodical rather than instinctual, each tissue analyzed for its contribution to the creature's remarkable camouflage capabilities. As the Wraith's genetic material integrated with Xerxes' adaptive biology, new structures began forming throughout its body. Specialized cells that could manipulate electromagnetic radiation, organs that could bend light waves around its form, neural pathways that could coordinate complex optical illusions. Within hours, Xerxes could render itself effectively invisible to most forms of detection. But the transformation went beyond mere camouflage. Through the Wraith's preserved neural tissue, Xerxes gained insights into monster hunting behaviors, the patience required for ambush tactics, the ability to move silently through space, and most importantly, the instinctual knowledge of how to avoid detection by other monsters. The second major acquisition came from a battlefield near the Tau Ceti system, where human forces had managed to bring down one of the massive Titan-class monsters that served as living battleships for larger monster swarms. The creature had been enormous, nearly a kilometer long, with armor plating that could withstand direct hits from antimatter cannons. The battle that killed it had been devastating for both sides. Human records indicated the loss of an entire battle group to destroy the single creature, while monster forces had been forced to abandon the system entirely after losing their mobile command platform. The Titan's corpse had been drifting in space for months, slowly being cannibalized by smaller scavengers, but its core structures remained intact. Xerxes spent days methodically harvesting tissue from the Titan's armored hide and internal reinforcement structures. The creature's defensive capabilities were the result of millions of years of evolutionary pressure, cellular matrices that could redistribute kinetic energy, biometallic compounds that could self-repair, and redundant organ systems that allowed it to function even after suffering massive damage. Integrating the Titan's durability was more challenging than the Wraith's stealth capabilities. Xerxes' body underwent painful restructuring as its skeletal system was reinforced with biometallic compounds. Its skin developed overlapping armor plates that could shift and adapt to different types of damage, and its organs gained the redundancy that had allowed Titans to survive encounters that would destroy lesser creatures. The transformation left Xerxes significantly larger and more imposing, though still humanoid in basic configuration. More importantly, it gained the confidence that came with near invulnerability, a psychological change that would prove crucial in future encounters with both humans and monsters. The third and most dangerous acquisition came from the remains of a Void Walker, one of the rare monsters capable of manipulating space-time to transport themselves and others across vast distances instantly. These creatures were among the most mysterious of their species, their bio-organs containing structures that seemed to violate known laws of physics. Xeris found the corpse in the aftermath of a particularly vicious territorial battle between two Alpha-class monsters. The Voidwalker had been caught between the larger predators and torn apart, but its exotic organs had survived the destruction of its body. The biomechanical structures responsible for spatial manipulation were unlike anything in conventional biology, part organic tissue, part quantum field generators, part something that human science had no name for. The integration of Voidwalker capabilities was the most traumatic transformation yet. Xeris' nervous system had to develop entirely new pathways to process four-dimensional spatial relationships, while its cellular structure incorporated quantum mechanical processes that operated at the subatomic level. For days, Xeris experienced disorienting sensory input as its perception expanded to include folded space and parallel dimensions. When the transformation was complete, Xeris possessed abilities that made it effectively unstoppable. It could open rifts in space-time that allowed instantaneous travel across light-years of distance, manipulate gravity wells to trap or redirect enemies, and perceive spatial relationships in ways that gave it an almost supernatural awareness of its surroundings. But perhaps more valuable than the physical capabilities were the memories and instincts that came with each acquisition. The Voidwalker's neural tissue contained navigational knowledge of monster territory spanning dozens of star systems, including the locations of major breeding grounds, territorial boundaries, and the hidden passages through folded space that allowed monster forces to appear anywhere without warning. With these three major acquisitions, Xeris had become something unprecedented in the galaxy, a monster with stealth capabilities that could make it invisible to detection, defensive systems that could withstand direct assault by human capital ships, and transportation abilities that made it effectively untouchable. But more importantly, it had gained the tools necessary to move freely through both human and monster-controlled space. As Xeris tested its new abilities in the ruins of the Osiris-7 station, it began to attract attention from other creatures. Younger monsters, drawn by some instinctual recognition of superior capability, began gathering around the station. Unlike the territorial hierarchies that typically governed monster society, these followers seemed to recognize something different about Xeris, not just strength, but intelligence. The first to arrive was a small swarm of Scout-class monsters, creatures barely larger than human fighter craft, but with remarkable sensory capabilities. They approached Xeris with the submissive postures typically reserved for Alpha-class predators, but their behavior suggested curiosity rather than simple fear. Xeris found itself studying these potential followers with Zimmerman's scientific methodology. Unlike human military structures based on rank and training, monster hierarchies were purely instinctual. The strong dominated the weak, and survival was the only currency that mattered. But Xeris represented something new, intelligence that could plan beyond immediate survival, capabilities that transcended simple physical dominance. Using its new understanding of monster communication, a complex blend of bioelectric signals, pheromone releases, and electromagnetic pulses, Xeris began establishing a different kind of relationship with its followers. Rather than demanding submission through violence, it offered protection and shared resources. Rather than territorial claims based on strength, it provided strategic advantages through intelligence. The arrangement proved beneficial for all involved. The Scout-class monsters gained access to superior hunting grounds and protection from larger predators, while Xeris acquired a network of reconnaissance assets that could monitor both human and monster activities across multiple star systems. But Xeris's greatest advantage came from the technology salvaged from countless battlefields. Using his acquired engineering knowledge, It began creating biomechanical hybrids that combined monster adaptability with human technological principles. Abandoned human equipment was retrofitted with organic components, creating devices that could interface directly with monster biology while maintaining technological sophistication. The first successful hybrid was a communication system that could intercept and decode human military transmissions while simultaneously monitoring monster bioelectric communications. The device, grown rather than built, integrated seamlessly with Xeris's enhanced nervous system and provided real-time intelligence about both sides of the war. Standing in the modified command center it had created within Osiris-7, surrounded by followers who looked to it for guidance rather than feared its strength, Xeris realized it had accomplished something no monster had ever achieved. It had begun building a society based on intelligence rather than instinct. But as it monitored the ongoing war through its hybrid technology, Xeris knew that time was running short. Each day brought new reports of human defeats, monster casualties, and the slow escalation toward total destruction. Both species were locked in a spiral of mutual destruction, and soon even Xeris's unique capabilities might not be enough to change their trajectory. The next phase of its plan would require something far more dangerous than scavenging abilities from corpses. It would require direct contact with humanity. And that contact would come sooner than Xeris expected, in the form of a desperate distress call from someone whose name carried profound significance in the memories it had inherited. Chapter 8. The Rescue Mission. The distress signal reached Xeris through its hybrid communication array at 1347 hours ship time. Among the dozens of human transmissions, it monitored daily tactical reports, supply requests, casualty lists. This particular emergency broadcast cut through the static with an urgency that made Xeris's enhanced consciousness focus with laser intensity. Mayday, Mayday, this is Federation Transport Nightingale, registration FT7749, carrying critical medical supplies to Kepler Station. We are under attack by hostile forces. Our escorts are destroyed. Shields are failing. Any Federation vessel in range, please respond. Our position is... The transmission dissolved into static as electromagnetic interference overwhelmed the signal. But Xeris had heard enough. The ship's voice identification systems, technology salvaged from a destroyed Federation cruiser and integrated with its own biomechanical interfaces, had already processed the captain's vocal patterns and provided a match that sent shockwaves through Zimmerman's inherited memories. Dr. Emma Zimmerman, Commander, Federation Medical Corps, age 34, xenobiology specialist, following in her father's footsteps despite the dangers. The daughter, Heinrich Zimmermann, had loved more than his own life. Through Zimmerman's memories, Xeris could see Emma as a child, brilliant and curious, asking endless questions about the creatures her father studied. It remembered her first published paper on monster bioelectric patterns, the pride in Zimmerman's voice when he'd spoken of her achievements, the deep love that had driven him to take increasingly dangerous assignments so she could have access to the best research facilities. The emotional response was overwhelming. For the first time since its transformation, Xeris felt the full weight of inherited human emotion, not just understanding love intellectually, but experiencing the desperate need to protect someone who mattered more than one's own survival. Scout Wing Alpha, Xeris transmitted to its followers using bioelectric communication patterns. Track transmission source. Emergency priority. Within minutes, the response came back. The Nightingale was 3 light-years away, deep in contested space where human supply runs were increasingly vulnerable to monster attack. The responding scouts reported massive biosignatures converging on the transport's position, a feeding swarm of at least 40 monsters drawn by the scent of easy prey. Xeris felt the tactical situation crystallize in its mind with Zimmerman's analytical precision. The transport was alone, its escorts already destroyed. It carried medical supplies desperately needed by human colonies. But more importantly to Xeris, it carried Emma Zimmerman, the one person in the galaxy whose survival mattered to the consciousness it had inherited. But a rescue attempt would be incredibly dangerous. Moving openly in contested space would expose Xeris to both human and monster forces. If Federation ships detected it, they would attack without question, seeing only another monster threat. If the attacking swarm identified it as competition, they would turn their aggression toward the more dangerous target. More troubling still, direct intervention would reveal Xeris's existence to humanity, ending its ability to operate in secret and potentially exposing its unique nature to both sides of the war. Everything it had worked toward could be compromised by this single act. Xeris stared at the tactical display for exactly 2.3 seconds and eternity in combat calculations before the decision crystallized. Through Zimmerman's memories, it knew what the old scientist would have done without hesitation. Some things mattered more than strategic considerations. "All units," Xeris transmitted, "prepare for emergency combat deployment. We have a rescue to perform." The response from its followers was immediate and absolute. Unlike human military structures that required explanation and justification, monster hierarchies operated on simpler principles. The leader commanded, the followers obeyed. But Xeris could sense something different in their bioelectric acknowledgments, not just instinctual submission, but something approaching loyalty born of successful leadership. Using its Void Walker capabilities, Xeris opened a spatial rift that transported its small force across 3 light-years in an instant. They emerged from folded space directly into chaos. The Nightingale was a Hermes-class transport, designed for speed and cargo capacity rather than combat. Its civilian-grade shields were failing under the assault of creatures that had learned to exploit every weakness in human defensive technology. Swarms of Razor-class monsters creatures resembling metallic wasps the size of shuttlecraft darted around the ship, their biometallic claws tearing through hull plating, while larger Crusher-class beasts hammered the failing shield generators with bone-crushing impacts. Through his enhanced sensory organs, Xeris could detect the terror of the human crew, their bioelectric signatures spiking with adrenaline and desperation. Emma's signature burned brightest on the bridge, her neural patterns showing the controlled panic of someone trained for command but facing overwhelming odds. The attacking monsters operated with typical swarm efficiency, no overall strategy beyond coordinated feeding behavior, but devastating effectiveness in their natural element. They had learned to disable human ships systematically. First the weapons, then the shields, then the engines, leaving the crew trapped and helpless before the final assault. But they had never faced anything like Xeris. Moving at speeds that human sensors could barely track, Xeris activated its Wraith-class stealth capabilities and became effectively invisible to both monster senses and human detection arrays. Its followers, guided by bioelectric commands, spread into attack formations that utilized intelligence rather than instinct. The first the swarm knew of Xeris's presence was when 3 Razor-class attackers simply vanished from the Nightingale's hull, crushed by gravitational fields that materialized around them without warning. Xeris's Void Walker abilities allowed it to manipulate space-time on a tactical level, creating gravity wells that could trap or destroy enemies with surgical precision. The swarm's reaction was immediate and predictable. They turned toward the new threat with the mindless aggression that had made them so effective against human forces. But Xeris wasn't human, and it understood monster psychology better than any creature they had previously encountered. Using its stealth capabilities, Xeris appeared to materialize directly in the center of the swarm, its Titan-class armor plating gleaming with biometallic enhancement. The psychological impact on the attacking monsters was profound. Here was clearly an alpha predator, larger and more dangerous than anything in their immediate hierarchy. But instead of the territorial dominance display they expected, Xeris did something unprecedented in monster behavior. It communicated. The bioelectric transmission was complex, layered with harmonics that spoke directly to the monster's instinctual recognition systems. The message was simple but absolute. This prey is claimed. Withdraw or be destroyed. For most of the swarm, the command was sufficient. Faced with a clearly superior predator claiming territorial rights, their instincts drove them to seek easier prey elsewhere. They began withdrawing from the nightingale, their bioelectric signatures showing submission to superior force. But several of the larger Crusher-class monsters challenged the territorial claim, their own alpha instincts driving them to test Xeris's dominance. The resulting battle was brief and decisive. Xeris moved through the attacking monsters with fluid precision, its enhanced capabilities making the combat almost anticlimactic. Gravity fields crushed one Crusher while it was still accelerating toward the target. Spatial distortions folded another monster in on itself, compressing its massive form into a sphere of dying tissue. The third and largest challenger found itself trapped in a localized time dilation field. Its movements slowed to a crawl, while Xeris calmly positioned itself for a killing strike. Within minutes, the entire swarm had either fled or been destroyed. The Nightingale drifted in space, its hull scarred but intact, its crew alive but undoubtedly confused by their sudden salvation. But Xeris faced a new problem: how to make contact with the humans without triggering their defensive responses. Through Zimmerman's memories, it knew that Federation protocols called for immediate attack on any unknown creature, regardless of apparent intentions. The solution came from the same memories that had driven the rescue. Xeris activated its biomechanical communication array and broadcast on Federation emergency frequencies using Dr. Heinrich Zimmerman's personal access codes that Emma would recognize instantly. Federation Transport Nightingale, this is a friend of your father, Xeris transmitted, its voice carefully modulated to human normal frequencies. You are safe. The hostile forces have been eliminated. The response came after a long pause, Emma's voice tight with disbelief. Unknown contact, identify yourself immediately. How do you know my father's codes? Xeris felt the weight of the moment settling around it like a physical force. Everything that followed would depend on these next few words. Whether humanity would gain an ally or simply acquire a new enemy, they couldn't understand. My name is Xeris, it replied, using the name it had chosen for itself. I knew your father, Dr. Heinrich Zimmerman. I carry his memories, his knowledge, and his love for you. We need to talk. The silence that followed stretched across space and time, pregnant with possibilities that could reshape the war or destroy any hope of peace between the species. Xeris waited, surrounded by the debris of the battle it had just won, for Emma Zimmerman to make the choice that would determine both their fates. When her voice finally came back across the communication channel, it carried wonder, terror, and a desperate hope that matched Xeris's own. Unknown contact. Xeris, what are you? Chapter 9. The Proposal. The meeting took place in the cargo hold of the Nightingale, a sterile space filled with medical supplies destined for colonies that might not survive to receive them. Emma Zimmerman stood behind a hastily erected force field barrier, her hand resting on her sidearm, despite knowing it would be useless against a creature that had just destroyed an entire monster swarm. Xeris materialized through the ship's hull using its Voidwalker abilities, its form shifting from the translucent state of spatial manipulation to solid reality. Emma's first sight of the creature that claimed to carry her father's memories was both fascinating and terrifying. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, Xeris appeared humanoid at first glance, but details revealed its alien nature. Its skin shifted between pale human appearance and chitinous plates depending on the angle of view, while its eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. When it moved, There was a fluid grace that no human could match, yet its posture and gestures carried unmistakably human characteristics. "Dr. Emma Zimmerman," Zaris said, its voice a harmonic blend that could have passed for human if not for subtle tonal qualities no human throat could produce. "You have your father's eyes, but your mother's stubborn chin. Heinrich always said you inherited the best qualities of both parents." Emma felt her breath catch. No alien creature should know such intimate details about her family, yet the way Zaris spoke carried emotional undertones that felt genuinely familiar. "My father, is he—" "He died in the assault on the vessel The Dream 6 months ago," Zaris replied gently. "He faced his end with the same scientific curiosity that defined his life. His last words were about you wondering if you were safe, hoping you would continue his work." Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed during the months of uncertainty finally broke through Emma's professional composure. Her father had been listed as missing in action, but she had always known the truth. The Dream had been one of many research vessels that simply vanished in the contested zones. "How?" she whispered. "How do you know this?" Zaris stepped closer to the force field barrier, its movements careful and non-threatening. "I consumed him during that final battle. Not just his flesh, but his memories, his knowledge, his consciousness. In my species, such feeding normally provides only physical sustenance, but I am different. I gain not just nutrition, but everything the person was." The revelation should have filled Emma with revulsion, yet something in Zaris's manner suggested grief, rather than predation. "You're one of them, one of the monsters." "I was," Zaris agreed, "but I have become something else, something unprecedented in the galaxy. I possess your father's scientific training, his love for discovery, his deep affection for you. I also retain the biological capabilities of my species' strength, adaptability, the ability to survive in environments that would kill humans instantly." Emma studied the creature that claimed to carry her father's consciousness. "Prove it. Tell me something only he would know." Zaris was quiet for a moment, accessing memories that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. "You were 7 years old when he taught you to identify stellar classifications. You insisted that binary star systems looked like cosmic butterflies, and he spent 3 hours explaining why that wasn't scientifically accurate. But that night, he made notes in his research journal about the poetic beauty of stellar formations, inspired by a child's innocent observation." Emma's hand moved away from her weapon. The memory was precise, personal, and touched with the kind of paternal love that no alien creature should understand. "Why did you save me?" "Because Heinrich Zimmerman loved you more than his own life, and I carry that love within me, but also because you represent something crucial to both our species' survival." Zaris gestured to the cargo hold around them. "This ship carries medical supplies to human colonies. You risk your life to save others. That selflessness, that dedication to something beyond personal survival, it's what makes humanity worth preserving." "Worth preserving?" Emma stepped closer to the barrier. "We're losing this war, aren't we?" Zaris nodded gravely. "Humanity is currently weaker than my species in terms of raw physical capability, but human intelligence makes you unpredictable, adaptable. In a prolonged conflict, your resources and technological advancement could eventually equal our biological advantages. The result would be mutual destruction, a war of attrition that would devastate both civilizations." The weight of that assessment settled over Emma like a shroud. "How long do we have?" "At current rates of escalation, perhaps 5 years before the conflict becomes total. 10 years before one or both species face extinction." Zaris paused, its alien features shifting to express something that might have been sorrow. "I have seen the battlefield reports, analyzed the casualty statistics. Both sides are already bleeding resources they cannot replace." Emma deactivated the force field barrier, making a choice that could have been viewed as either brave or foolish. "What do you want from me?" "I want to prevent that mutual extinction," Xeris replied. "But I cannot do it alone. My species operates on instinct rather than intelligence. With rare exceptions, ancient territorial leaders who achieved evolution through metamorphosis, we lack the consciousness necessary for strategic thinking. The creatures attacking human colonies are not evil. They are simply following biological imperatives they cannot question. And you're different? I am unique. Possibly the only member of my species to achieve true sentience through the consumption of conscious beings. I understand both monster instinct and human reasoning. I can see possibilities that neither side can imagine." Emma found herself drawn into the conversation despite its surreal nature. "What possibilities?" Xeris moved to the cargo hold's viewport, gazing out at the stars that marked the boundary between human and monster space. "Territory. The monsters attacking human colonies are what you might call wild creatures without territory or leadership, driven by pure survival instinct. The evolved leaders who could control them remain in their own domains, focused on maintaining dominance over their established territories rather than expanding into human space. So the attacks are essentially random? Random, but devastating. These wild monsters see human space as unclaimed territory ripe for conquest. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be negotiated with, cannot be deterred except through force." Xeris turned back to Emma. "But they can be controlled by a superior predator who claims authority over them." Emma began to understand the implications. "You want to unite them under your leadership. I want to create a buffer zone territory controlled by intelligent monsters who can prevent wild swarms from reaching human space. If I can gather enough followers and establish dominance over the regions adjacent to human territory, I can effectively end the random attacks that are slowly bleeding your civilization to death. And in return, recognition of that territory as sovereign monster space. An end to human expansion into regions already claimed by my kind. A formal peace treaty that acknowledges both species' right to exist without interference." Emma stared at the creature that spoke with her father's knowledge and emotional depth, while offering solutions no human strategist had imagined. "The Federation will never believe this. They'll think it's a trap." "That's why I need you," Xeris said simply. "You're Heinrich Zimmermann's daughter, a respected researcher, and now the only human who has direct experience with evolved monster intelligence. Your testimony could open minds that would otherwise remain closed. Assuming I survive to give it." Xeris reached into its biomechanical storage organs and withdrew a device that pulsed with organic circuitry. A communication array, biomechanically enhanced to work across interstellar distances. It can reach me anywhere in this galaxy, instantly. Emma accepted the device, noting its warm, living texture. "This could be used to track you." "I'm counting on it," Xeris replied. "My base is deep in monster territory, surrounded by creatures loyal to me. Human forces couldn't reach it and survive, but the ability to communicate demonstrates my commitment to this alliance." Emma studied the alien device in her hands, then looked back at Xeris. "What makes you think this will work? That either side can overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming? Because both sides have more to gain from peace than from war," Xeris answered. "Humans gain security and the opportunity to continue expanding into truly unclaimed space. Monsters gain stability and the chance to develop beyond mere survival instinct. And both sides avoid the mutual extinction that awaits us if this conflict continues." Emma made her decision with the same scientific precision her father had taught her. "I'll take your proposal to Federation Command, but I need you to understand. They'll want proof of your capabilities, evidence that you can deliver on these promises." "Then watch the tactical reports over the next few months," Xeris replied, beginning to fade as it prepared to return to folded space. You'll see wild monster attacks in Sectors 7 through 12 begin to diminish as creatures start acknowledging new territorial boundaries. The change will be gradual but noticeable to anyone monitoring the larger patterns. And if they agree to negotiate, then we begin the most important work either of our species has ever attempted, learning to coexist instead of simply survive. Xeris paused at the threshold between dimensions. Tell them that Heinrich Zimmermann's knowledge lives on, dedicated to preserving both the humanity he loved and the species he came to understand. That should be enough to get their attention. As Xeris vanished into folded space, Emma was left alone with a biomechanical communication device and the weight of carrying the most important message in galactic history. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the struggles of the tiny organic intelligences trying to find their place among them. But for the first time since the war began, those struggles might have a purpose beyond mere survival. Emma activated her device's recording function and began composing the message that could save two civilizations or damn them both to eternal conflict. Federation Command. This is Commander Emma Zimmermann aboard the transport Nightingale. I am transmitting a report of first contact with an evolved monster intelligence claiming to offer terms for peace. You're not going to believe this, but I need you to listen carefully. Chapter 10. The Long Peace. 37 years after first contact. The unification campaign that followed Emma Zimmermann's report to Federation Command became the stuff of legend, though few understood its true scope until decades after its completion. What appeared to human observers as a gradual reduction in monster attacks was actually the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. A systematic conquest, not of territory, but of consciousness itself. Xeris's war against the chaos of wild monster society began in the Outer Rim territories where territorial boundaries were fluid and leadership structures primitive. Unlike traditional monster hierarchies based purely on size and aggression, Xeris built power through strategic thinking, resource management, and the promise of stability in a universe that had known only endless conflict. The early campaigns were brutal affairs. Territorial leaders who had ruled through force did not yield their dominance easily. But Xeris possessed advantages no challenger had ever brought to such conflicts. Complete understanding of human tactical doctrine combined with monster biological superiority. Intelligence that could plan decades ahead while maintaining the ruthlessness necessary for survival. And most crucially, the ability to offer something beyond mere territorial expansion. Where traditional alpha predators demanded submission through fear, Xeris offered partnership through mutual benefit. Younger monsters gained protection and access to better hunting grounds. Older creatures found their territorial claims secured against random challengers. Most importantly, the constant wastage of resources through endless infighting began to diminish as Xeris imposed order on regions that had known only chaos. The transformation was not without cost. Xeris absorbed dozens of challenger leaders over the decades, each consumption adding new capabilities while threatening to overwhelm its evolved consciousness with primitive instincts. Maintaining individual identity while integrating the biological imperatives of apex predators required constant mental discipline that would have destroyed a lesser intelligence. But with each victory, Xeris's vision of controlled expansion became reality. The buffer zone between human and monster space grew from a few contested star systems to a sprawling territory encompassing hundreds of worlds. Wild monster attacks on human colonies didn't cease entirely, but they became rare enough that Federation forces could respond effectively rather than simply react to ongoing catastrophe. The Genetic Engineering Project. Perhaps Xeris's most ambitious undertaking was not military conquest, but biological revolution. Using knowledge inherited from Dr. Zimmermann's monster research, combined with capabilities gained through consuming dozens of different creature types, Xeris began the systematic modification of monster genetics to create something unprecedented in galactic history. The Neo-Xeris, as these new beings came to be known, retained the physical advantages of their monstrous heritage-enhanced strength, adaptive biology, regenerative capabilities, and survival instincts honed over millions of years of evolution. But they possessed something their ancestors had never achieved: human-like cognition, emotional depth, and the capacity for individual consciousness that made true civilization possible. The early experiments were failures, producing creatures that were neither fully monster nor approaching human intelligence. But Xeris persevered, refining the genetic templates with each generation. The breakthrough came when it learned to incorporate not just human neural patterns, but the philosophical frameworks that made consciousness meaningful. Concepts like justice, beauty, scientific inquiry, and moral responsibility. The first successful Neo-Xeris emerged after 15 years of careful development. Standing 8 feet tall with the fluid grace of their monster heritage, but possessing eyes that held genuine intelligence, they represented something entirely new in the galaxy. They could appreciate art, conduct scientific research, form lasting emotional bonds, and most importantly, they could choose their own evolutionary path rather than simply responding to environmental pressure. The Treaty of Proxima. When the formal peace negotiations finally began, they took place aboard Concordia Station, a massive space platform constructed specifically for the purpose at the gravitational balance point between Sol and Proxima Centauri. The symbolism was deliberate, a neutral ground where neither species held territorial advantage, built through the combined efforts of human engineering and monster biological adaptation. Admiral Emma Zimmerman, now 71 years old and bearing the scars of 4 decades spent building bridges between species, signed on behalf of the Interplanetary Federation. Across the table, Xeris, now ancient by monster standards and having undergone numerous evolutionary adaptations, represented not only its territory, but also a federation of other monster territories who allied with him. The treaty itself was a masterwork of diplomatic complexity, establishing formal borders that acknowledged both species' expansion needs while preventing the territorial conflicts that had triggered the original war. Trade agreements allowed for the exchange of human technology and monster biological innovations. Cultural exchange programs began the slow process of building understanding between radically different forms of consciousness. Most importantly, the treaty established the peacekeeping core integrated units of humans and Neo-Xeris working together to prevent the emergence of new conflicts. These teams proved remarkably effective, their combined capabilities allowing them to resolve disputes that would have been impossible for either species to handle alone. New society. The hybrid civilization that emerged from decades of careful cooperation exceeded even Xeris's most optimistic projections. Neo-Xeris served as natural ambassadors between the species, their dual heritage allowing them to understand both human technological thinking and monster biological instincts. They became scientists, explorers, artists, and philosophers, contributing perspectives that neither parent species could have achieved independently. Human colonies began incorporating monster biological innovations, living buildings that could adapt to environmental changes, transportation systems based on spatial manipulation, medical treatments that utilized accelerated regenerative capabilities. Monster territories gained access to human manufacturing techniques, communication technologies, and most importantly, educational systems that allowed younger creatures to develop beyond their instinctual programming. Xeris itself continued to evolve, guided now by wisdom rather than mere survival necessity. Its consciousness had expanded to encompass not just the memories of those it had consumed, but genuine understanding of concepts like legacy, responsibility, and the long-term consequences of leadership. It had become something unique in the galaxy, a bridge between biological evolution and conscious choice. Epilogue. Centuries hence, in 2387, more than 3 centuries after the signing of the Treaty of Proxima, The Great War, as historians now call it, has become ancient history, remembered primarily through monuments and museum displays. Children of both species learn about it as a cautionary tale of what can happen when fear overcomes understanding. Dr. Sarah Chen Zaris, a third-generation human Neo-Zaris researcher, stood in the observation deck of the exploration vessel Unity, watching binary stars paint aurora across the hull of their ship. Beside her, Captain Marcus Rodriguez, a human, whose great-grandfather had fought in the final battles of the war, studied readings from their long-range sensors. "New galaxy cluster coming into range," Rodriguez reported. "Preliminary scans suggest at least 14 systems with potentially habitable worlds." "Any signs of indigenous intelligence?" Chen Zaris asked, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of her dual heritage. "Not yet, but we're still too far out for detailed analysis." They had been exploring together for 5 years now, part of the joint expeditionary forces that represented their greatest achievement, the ability to reach beyond their own solar systems as partners seeking knowledge and new forms of life to understand. In the ship's biomechanical processing core, a fragment of consciousness that had been gifted by the ancient Zaris monitored their progress with satisfaction. This copied intelligence retained the memories and wisdom of the original creature while serving as the ship's guiding system, helping coordinate the complex interactions between human technology and Neo-Zaris biological adaptations. The original Zaris, now residing in the sprawling biocities of the Proxima territories, had undergone so many evolutionary changes over the centuries that its original form was barely recognizable. But its core purpose remained unchanged: to build bridges between different forms of life and consciousness. By sharing fragments of its evolved intelligence with exploration vessels like the Unity, it continued to guide the peaceful expansion of their hybrid civilization across the galaxy. The ancient creature had learned that evolution's greatest achievement was not the survival of the fittest, but the development of intelligence capable of choosing cooperation over competition. It had seen 2 species transform from bitter enemies into partners capable of exploring the infinite possibilities that awaited among the stars. As the Unity adjusted course toward the new galaxy cluster, its mixed crew of humans and Neo-Zaris working together with the unconscious efficiency of long partnership, the consciousness fragment within the ship's core reflected on the long journey from mindless predator to architect of galactic peace. Zaris's greatest evolution had been learning to value life over conquest, understanding over dominance, and hope over fear. The war that had once threatened to destroy both species had instead taught them the most important lesson in the universe: that consciousness, once achieved, carried with it the responsibility to help other forms of life achieve the same transcendence. In seeking to save themselves, they had discovered how to save each other. And in the vast darkness between galaxies, that lesson burned like a beacon for any intelligence wise enough to recognize its light.